Hey everybody, this is Dan Marsala, and this is my applying the structural frame presentation. This was the current structure of the Memorial Campus where I worked before I left. We had our director, and then we had but below them was a manager, um, and they both split time on day shift between both campuses. So if one was at the Memorial campus, the other one was at the university campus, and so on and so forth. And then we had two evening supervisors who were there from 1 p.m. to 10 p.m., and they too also alternated time between campuses. Um, so then, they created these lead therapist positions, which were supposed to kind of fill leadership positions to have more of a presence, obviously, because, a director, a manager, just two supervisors between, the largest hospital system in central Massachusetts. That's kind of not a lot, in my opinion. Um, they created these lead therapist positions to, provide more of a leadership presence at all hours, and then also to fill, some of these roles that um, really weren't being done, like, educational stuff, refreshers on equipment. They were supposed to have handle doing like staffing assignments and things like that, but they're supposed to do this with a very light assignment load, and then have these lead therapist duties on top of that. And then below the lead therapists, you had your staff RTs. The problem that we ran into coming out of COVID, the second wave, was the, quote unquote, the bean counters, the finance people, saying that we were over budget and our procedures were down from the prior year, which obviously, of course, they were because, a big part of our bread and butter was floor therapy, and we weren't doing that because of, aerosol precautions and COVID. And stuff. So then they were saying that we were overstaffed. So they kind of really, upper management here really kind of clamped down on staffing, making us run with, very, very bare minimum staff. And these lead therapists ended up taking, full on assignments on top of doing, quote unquote, the duties that they were originally supposed to do. At the Memorial campus, we did have a level 3 NICU, which was 50 beds. And if, there was a call from outlying hospital that had a newborn that was in distress or anything like that, our NICU team had to go out and pick up the baby. Which took, usually the lead therapist had the backup, NICU backup role. So that took them off the floor for potentially hours at a time. And, they were making us run with 4 staff on nights at times, and that would leave 1 therapist in the NICU, and then 2 therapists to cover 2 adult ICUs, an ER, and 8 patient floors as well. So the department structure, vertical coordination played a huge role in the structure. You have higher levels of coordinate and control the work of the subordinates to authority. And then rules and policies and planning, and control systems. Our authority, we had the director, the manager, the supervisors, and then below them the lead RTs. And then the problem too is, the director and the manager. The manager was originally, prior to the current structure, a day shift supervisor at the university campus, and the director officially became the director, and the manager kind of moved, the supervisor moved into this manager role. But there's kind of like a lot of vying for power between the two, So they're kind of both almost filling the same role, which was kind of weird at times. Then obviously, rules and policies. You have the hospital policies and department policies and procedures that were followed. And then protocols, obviously, and then planning and control systems. This was really, I guess you could say, the Epic EMR that we used for, everything, scanning meds, etc. It was really used for tracking a lot. They could, this was more of a performance control for our department. they could track productivity levels. They would run audit, on staff to check their productivity levels. But they never gave, clear-cut ideas for increasing productivity. The problem is, there was all these things that you could add into that weren't, like, automatically populated for productivity, that, our managers and these finance people were looking at, but they never gave clear-cut, like, training on, like, okay, you guys need to put this, and this in if you're doing this, and this. There was never any clear-cut education on that. Lateral coordination structure also played a part. This is techniques such as formal and informal meetings, task forces, coordinating roles, matrix structures, typically less formal and more flexible than authority-based systems and rules, and often simpler and quicker. We did have a lot of meetings before each shift. We were supposed to have a pre-shift huddle. Obviously, didn't happen all the time. Just to kind of give an idea of, what's the busiest area, who might need more help, etc., etc. We did have weekly idea board meetings on Tuesday mornings between both campuses. And then we had monthly department meetings between, this was just individual hospital department meetings where, we could raise concerns, give ideas, etc. And then task forces, we had what was called unit-based teams. It was created to come up with ideas and fixes. It was, the union was, reps were involved with it, the department, management, the lead therapist, etc. Here we came up with lists and ideas of things that we could increase, revenues by more stuff that we could physically put a monetary charge on. But we also, came up with lists and stuff of these productivity charges, which again, as I mentioned before, great, we came up with these lists, but, they never did anything to teach or train to make sure everybody was on the same page of putting in all these things. So you had one person putting in all these productivity and the next person not, accept what was automatically populated. So how would I change it? So the Mintzberg Fives here, I'd kind of make it more of a divisional organization. You would have your director, get rid of that manager position, because like I said, you had two people kind of doing the same thing. So you just have the one director. They would kind of be like that headquarters. Off to the side of them, you have your techno structure, which would be the finance department, doing audits, that kind of thing, risk management. And then you have your support staff, which would be like environmental services, biomed, and educators. Now, the biggest thing was, you have two hospitals within the same system that are sister campuses. They're literally just right down the road from each other. But, they were very different entities, so what might work better at one might not necessarily work better at the other one. The university campus was the larger of the two. They had multiple adult ICUs. They had the PICU, the pediatric ICU, and their ER was a lot bigger. They had the level 1 trauma center, so they got all the trauma centers, life flights, that kind of thing. The Memorial campus smaller, just had 2 adult ICUs. They had the level 3 NICU, smaller ER. And then, a lot of patient floors, got a lot of thoracic surgeries, did a lot of vest therapy, like all that kind of stuff. So what might work for here didn't necessarily work for here because, we had things to account for as far as, like I said, those transportation calls, etc. So I think it would work much better, having that director that kind of lays out the groundwork, but then you have your, day, evening, and night supervisors that kind of manage each division of the organization. That, they can just better tailor it to them because, when you have people just bouncing between campuses in these management roles, they're at one hospital, but they're doing work for the other and stuff like that. So I just think, just having people just focus on each individual division versus focusing on 2 places at the same time would just be a little bit better. And then under those supervisors, you'd have the RTs. And I really don't think you needed that, those lead therapist positions, actually, after kind of going through these modules here so far. You know, it's an organization has different business units. You'll see a divisional structure. You have your central HQ, like I said, which is the director. They support autonomous units, which would be the Memorial and University campuses, and that make their own decisions and have their own unique structure. You know, it allows the supervisors to maintain more control and accountability than in a machine structure. And your day-to-day decision-making is decentralized. It allows for the director to focus on the big picture, while the supervisors can focus on their, you know, the smaller picture. So it's a really good definition of teams. You know, two or more individuals who socially interact, possess one or more common goals, are brought together to perform organizationally relevant tasks, exhibit interdependencies to workflow goals and outcomes, while maintaining different roles and responsibilities while being embedded in an encompassing organizational system with boundaries, linkages, and the broader system context and task environment. You know, different groups within the structural organization have needs in their best interest in mind. When there is an attempt to restructure, you need to acknowledge that there will be natural tensions among these competing interests. You know, some groups are going to obviously naturally have more influence than others when it comes to influencing the final outcome. So obviously, you know, this is kind of management's going to have much more influence on final outcomes than, you know, the regular staff therapists and stuff like that. You know, so the groups, teams in the structural frame, you know, they're great when they can come together and find solutions that, you know, the problems that benefit everyone. But the caveat to this is when one party in the group seems to be putting their interest over everyone else's, you know, it could reduce morale and participation. You know, we'd have these meetings that were voluntary to go to. People, you know, these staff would have issues, but they're just kind of so beaten down that, you know, they wouldn't take part in these meetings and wouldn't, you know, raise their concerns. And, you know, this is why it's important. There's an important need for consistent participation. You know, so, you know, if you're not going to raise your concerns and not participate, it's not going to do any good. So the reframing and change perspective, you know, so after going through this information and listening to Professor Wynn's lecture, you know, I really feel that there really wasn't a need, as I mentioned before, for these lead therapists, but more of a need to completely just reframe the structural organization of these departments between these hospitals and the hospital system itself. And like I said, you know, while both departments from both campuses follow the same policies and procedures, you know, they're very different entities, you know, with different patient populations that they see, and you just really, I don't think, can run one campus like you run the other one. You know, before, when I first started there on my student license, it was kind of more of a divisional. The current director spent more of their time over at the university campus. They came over to ours, you know, every now and then, but we had 2 supervisors a day and an evening supervisor. And, you know, they just, you know, really kind of had autonomous control. Then that day shift supervisor over there became the manager and got very more involved in our campus. Like, you know, we had self-scheduling at our campus, but she, you know, that supervisor did all the scheduling at the university campus. You know, she came into the picture and kind of started to try to run it more like she was doing things over there, and it just created a lot of tension. So, like I said, I think this is where that divisional structure is better, where, you know, you can follow those same policies and procedures laid down by that headquarters, but in the end, you know, they're kind of more autonomous units with, you know, how things are run to better meet, you know, the size of the departments and stuff like that. And these are my references, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Sorry, I was a little bit over time, but I was trying to fit everything in there. Have a good one.